Hello, William. Glad you're here. All right, let's get started. Mike, if you would please introduce yourself to the community.
Hey everybody, my name is Mike Williams. I am the author of Doing to Done and the creator of something called the Clarity Collection. Um, Formerly I've gone on a particular career journey. I used to work at General Electric, used to be in healthcare information technology for many, many years. I left that to become the CEO of the David Allen Company. He wrote a book called Getting Things Done, which led me in the world of helping professionals and business leaders improve their workflow within the context of what they're trying to accomplish. David and I wrote a book together called Getting Things Done for Teens. And one of the interesting things about that, it was a very simple visual book, and adults really liked it. So I said, hey, all right, I'll take the hint from the market like we all do as business leaders. And then I went out and I wrote a book called Doing to Done Productivity Made Simple, which just really distilled all my experiences from GE, the David Allen Company, and I also worked at Zappos with Tony Hsieh and really created a nice, simple approach for turning overwhelm into focus and clarity. And that's what I specialize in. So I'm a business advisor, I'm a coach for business leaders, and have a particular passion for helping students as well. So, and I like to do open water swimming. If anybody out there is an open water swimmer, that's my jam as well.
I love it. So yeah, there's like a wonderful background of experiences and expertise, and I think the common theme, knowing you so far and your work, it's simplicity and trying to make things as digestible and really fight against the overwhelming nature of either being a very ambitious career professional or someone that is an entrepreneur and trying to build their own business. With that in mind, what kind of experiences did you have in your life that led to that focus in your own work and the passion that you have in sharing that with others?
Yeah. So, one of the things strategically for doing to done, one of the things I focused on is simple is greater than complex, visual is better than wordy, and engaging is better than boring. So to get to simple, visual, and engaging, uh, basically I view everybody as a hero on their own journey, depending on what they're trying to do. And I've developed a series of maps to help people navigate those journeys, and I can share those here today. But it's through my journey of working. I didn't come from a business background myself. My dad was a teacher and a coach. So I kind of grew into business through the experiences that I had and the mentor that I had. But one of the things that always struck me is the best communicators were those that were able to take complexity and really go simple with it. Like, what is the basic principle behind this that's driving it? One of my favorite things in life is the Pareto chart, which is what are the 20% of the activities that deliver 80% of the value? And let's not get distracted by all the other stuff. And if we can learn the practice of a practice, then you can start engaging on a path of mastery, which has helped me throughout my career. And I didn't realize when I was a little kid, I used to play basketball and I used to practice in my driveway, which had some ruts. And really, the only place I could practice and get rewarded was a foul shot. So that's where I learned how to practice a foul shot and learn all the practices within a practice of a foul shot. And then once you get those in your nervous system, a foul shot becomes much easier. So, way back in the early days, before I had language for it, I learned that I was learning the practice of a practice. So, that has led me and informed me and changed me in how I handle business practices, parenting practices, relationship practices, all the above. So that's kind of what informed me, Gary.
Yeah, I'm glad you're touching on this, especially in the world of startups. And startup culture really permeates into more traditional kind of entrepreneurship. You know, someone that wants to start a, when I say traditional business, more like a mom and pop kind of, like, you know, a laundromat or some other business that's not by its very nature designed to scale rapidly like a tech startup is, right? But
Right.
part of this culture is this idea that documentation and that sort of, you know, extra time put into being aware of the practices of the practice are waste of time. And for me, doing this a long time, being around lots of people, doing it myself, and talking to amazing people like yourself as well, there's always this wonderful place that's in between these two extremes of going all the time as fast as possible and not taking the time to look where you're going and pay attention, and the other extreme, which is having your head down and planning and just going through strategies and plans and not taking action. So I'm curious from your perspective, and with, you know, your project management systems and finding that 20%, how important is it to be documenting, and what sort of methodology would you advise people in doing some of that foundational work, those documentation, and coming up with uh, you know, a way to hone in on that 20%?
Yeah, I think a lot of interesting nuggets in that question. So, if I were to choose an analogy, I would choose like Google Maps. Like if you're going into a territory or a city or a country, where's the first place you start? You pull up a map and you might say you're thinking about going to Europe. You might pull up a map of Europe. And then you might be like, you know what? I'm thinking France. So you zoom in on France. Then you know what? I think I'm thinking Paris. So you go down deeper into Paris. And then in Paris, you're like, well, what arrondissement do I want to be in? You know, and then you start searching around. And you'd be like, I want to be on the left bank. And so you click down into the left bank. And then at one of those levels, you get to street view. And then you finally, get your bearing on Paris. And let's pretend that you're now there in person and you have to take your first step in a direction. that is that is what maps and having things externalized in the appropriate format can help you navigate. So this might be a good time to maybe hop into some maps that I have here just to show. And let me see, let me share a screen here. Actually, sure, I'll share the entire screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yeah, we got the whole screen. Yeah.
Okay, just a second. My phone is freaking out with some kind of alarm.
Yeah. Also,
Earth.
William, Janice, I know both of you are working on projects.
It says there's an earthquake coming, so I don't
Oh, well. Be
know.
braced.
If I start
Those
shaking, that's
watching.
why.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see who
Okay,
shakes first.
so
Oh yeah. All right. There's my phone freaking out.
and okay, so you can see my screen. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're looking at we're looking at like a screen of a screen within a screen. Uh,
Okay, so let me stop sharing and share a window,
yeah,
perhaps.
yeah. Share the window. Yeah.
Share window. Yeah, I want to share this window. Okay,
There we go.
how about now?
Yeah.
And you see my little red squirrely?
Yep.
Okay, so using my analogy that I used before, um, here are the core doing to done maps that I bring into a coaching session to help create context for people, or when I'm training, or if you go through the book or anything like that. And So these maps are meant to create context and hold the conversation at the appropriate level. So, one of the first maps you can enter into is where am I on the journey of life? Uh, so this one is where you draw a line at your current age, and what that helps us do is establish current reality and the current you within a context. And over here we have the past you, and over here we have the future you that you're moving towards. And this space in between, we call that fresh start territory. So basically, that sets the context of how can the current you help the future you become the best you. And Gary, that goes to your question of the value of writing things down. So often when I'm coaching, I either start at the lowest level of perspective, which is down here, or the highest level of perspective, which is up here. Now, the the three core maps that we have here, particularly these two, one starts with the question, we call it a brain sweep, and I'll just ask you, what's on your mind? And for 5 minutes, I'd have you write it down. Okay, so this is writing example number one of capturing a thought that has your attention, writing the things that you're thinking about today in current reality. And I call that the party in the brain. So we start to name the characters in the party and you write it down. And when you write it down, you externalize your thinking, you name the characters in the party, and you go over here and you're able to say, what's on your mind? Perhaps it is sales, perhaps it's mom, perhaps it's something else. But this way you get it out of your mind and now you've named it. And then the second part of this equation, and this is the fundamental piece of doing to done, is how do we turn that thing that's on your mind into a doing and done statement if it belongs into a doing and done statement. So let's say mom's on your mind. And okay, well, why is mom on your mind? Perhaps she has a 60th birthday to celebrate. All right, that's what we call an outcome. That's your finish line. That's what done looks like. Your mom's 60th birthday is celebrated, and then your one next action. All we need here is a doing verb and a phrase. And what we're looking for here is what's the one next action that you can take to move this thing forward. And it might be, call sister to plan. And boom, you've got a doing and a done statement. And really, in using startup language, the minimum viable product of getting something off your mind from chaos into clarity is declaring what is the one next action. And that has a very distinct form. A doing verb plus a phrase will put your mind into action. But the problem is most people aren't down at this level of clarity. Their to-do lists look more like this. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So
one of the things that I love about like the system, what it's built on, is mindfulness and a lot of just root psychology, like human psychology in regards to managing anxiety or other aspects of your emotions and behaviors. And you've taken this and turned it into this wonderful approach to project management while also doing a lot of that internal work to put your mind at ease too, which is great.
yes. And I'm just going to break this into some business parts of this. So then we ask, what's the origin story of mom? Why is that even in your life? So if we zoom up the levels of perspective and go to a higher level of perspective, there are roles that you hold in your life. So this one probably comes in this example from son. And maybe as a son, you have a purpose to stay in touch with your parents throughout the ages. Your vision of wild success is enjoying them, celebrating them, all that kind of good stuff. And sometimes in that role, you have things you want to practice, like calling your parents once a week, or projects you need to do, like celebrating a major birthday. So that's where that particular thing in the Brain Suite list landed. Now, on the business side of things, on the startup side of the things, one of the frameworks I love to use is by a company called TrueSpace.com. And they define the major business roles. I'm a CEO, I compete, I capture, and I keep, and there's one more called control. But basically, as a business owner, you compete in the marketplace, you capture customers, and you want to keep them. So in the example below, in the sales example, that might be in the capture mode over here. How do I capture customers? And I have something on my mind from this particular role. So let me just zoom out. So now we've got stuff that's on our mind, and then we've got the origin story of where it started. So if we can get these two maps created for people, we can help them create agreements with themselves because this is your role clarity map. And the question here is, do I feel appropriately engaged with the roles of my life? And you can also extend that down, double click on that question. Do I feel appropriately engaged in all the roles of my business? Or am I favoring one because it's my favorite at the expense of another? Like strategic decisions versus, doing the work decisions. So that's kind of the tensions that we feel as a startup, as a business owner, as a business that's trying to, get over $10 million. These are the fundamental buckets that we're working in. So when I work with people and here in this community, I bet we will see ourselves in these roles based on your business context. But then there's all these personal roles that you got too, and sometimes there's a tension that you're bringing all this work energy home, and it could be causing hassles. And how do we create the appropriate agreements with ourselves? So fundamentally, I help people start with these two quadrants, roles and projects and actions. And then ultimately we end up in creating a trusted system for them on their computer, which is a role project action based system. And basically you can just think of that as an inventory of all the agreements you've made with yourself and others. So you probably got, 40 plus of those. The question is, can you see them all? And Gary, back to your point, that's the value of writing them all down because it's hard to store them all up here. And then when we get up, like today on a Monday, the question is, of those 40, what are my top 3 projects? And what are my top 5 actions today to help me gain momentum? And if you can do that successfully day in and day out, the rest will take care of itself because you'll start creating these small wins with big impacts as you get those things done.
Yeah, so
This one.
another kind of thing that I'm seeing here too is like agile development and with the project management side of things, like looking at these your clarity cards with your top 3 projects and 5 actions. It feels very Scrum to me. Like I don't have like a lot of different experience with many different project management systems, but Scrum being the most familiar I am, which is like, again, it's awesome how you've taken like Scrum, which in a lot of ways, especially with how some teams can implement it's extremely convoluted. It's just overwhelming. And again, you've made something that is much easier to kind of like digest and look at and not feel scared to engage with. And then going back to the other map that you showed with the roles and purpose, I think this is great too because there's something that a lot of people lose sight of, and that's authenticity. Authenticity with who they are, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and related to that, how they are representing themselves and these values and purpose with their behaviors. So I think that's really like like wonderful that you include that. I'm curious with all your experience, especially working with different teams with Zappos and others, like what sort of detriments and benefits can you speak to, the cons and pros of leadership especially, but the teams under them being able to come together and really, overcome different challenges or cultural kind of like failings, if you will, to become a little bit more authentic and productive and fulfilled, enjoy, like, having more enjoyment in what they're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So, yeah, but it's a good question, and let me just break it down. So, if we take a leader, and we'll call this leader Jane, and you know, as a leader, depending on what level you are in the organization, here's what I notice. If you're an individual contributor, basically what you're managing are projects and the associated actions. And many times these projects have been delegated to you, or you're managing a process as well. Projects and processes kind of go hand in hand. But if you're like a mid manager kind of person, then you're managing your own projects, but you're also delegating projects to other people. So you're delegating outcomes that you're waiting to come back to you. So that's kind of mid-level manager. And then they have their own actions that they need to manage. So they have three things to manage: their own projects, the projects that they delegated, and actions. And then as an executive, what you're doing here as the business grows and changes, you're defining new roles in the organization. You're also delegating projects, and you also have to manage your own actions. So at this level, executives delegate roles out to people that hold projects, that hold, actions. So this is the most complicated level to delegate from, because it impacts the business at a larger level. Okay. So just look at that: roles, projects, actions. The DNA of this conversation is quite simple. It just varies by the level that you're at. So now, for Jane, our leader here, to be effective, one of the things that she needs to do is be very clear on the roles that she's creating in her business, and very clear on the projects that she's delegating to her organization. Well, how do you do that? Well, at the role level, we already talked about that. You can do a role clarity map for your company as well. This is not just a personal thing, but what's the name of a role? What's its purpose? What's its vision for success? And when you get this level of clarity in a role, which typically an executive will help define, or a governance process will help define, then you enchant the role with a story. And then here is where the role does the practices, the projects, and the actions of the role that they've been handed. So, sometimes a job description is a bunch of roles put together. So that's role clarity. So if Jane can do this effectively, she can create, delete, or allow new roles to emerge and get really clear on why this role exists. Number one. All right, so let's go down to the project level. Now, another thing of leadership that is extremely important is when you're delegating projects, you want to make sure that your project name, X, Y, Z, before you delegate it, you want to be crystal clear on what's the purpose of the project and what's your vision of wild success for the project. So many people are delegating without that level of clarity. They don't know why they're delegating this project. It just feels important, but they haven't done this level of thinking. And if you're receiving a delegated project and these elements are missing, then this is an opportunity for you to ask these questions. What's the purpose of the project and what's the vision of Wild Success? Two of my favorite questions to ask are right here. And probably the one that cuts through the noise the fastest is if you're not clear on something, ask the person, hey, what's your vision of Wild Success for this thing? And just listen to the story that they tell. And you can start gathering information. And then when you get back, you can distill that here or in a document, replay it back to Jane in our example and say, hey, Jane, was this what you're looking for? Therefore, when you take on a delegated project and start working on it, you won't be surprised down the road that you were off track. Okay. And then a project has some other elements to it, such as how do I ideate? How do I organize it? How do I review that this plan will get me to the purpose and vision? And then all projects move forward with actions. So we're back to the one next action. So that helps us with the project side of it. So Gary, I'll pause there. So for a leader, if you establish something like this, what you start to create is a culture of shared language, shared tools, and shared practices. So if you have an organization that has clear roles and clearly can handle projects and knows how to launch new projects, that's half the battle. And that kind of clarity can go a long way in helping you get those projects done so you can get to the one behind it as well. So I'll pause there.
No, yeah, that's great. It definitely adds, I mean, a lot of context and a lot to like, understand and think about. Something that's coming to my mind, especially when it comes to asking those questions, right? Um, what, what have you seen in regards to a founder, a leader who struggles with those questions being asked of them? Um, do you have advice for founders that find themselves in that role? Do you also have other advice for those that may be asking questions of their employer, their co-founder, their boss?
Well, let's take it from the perspectives of each person. So if I'm a founder and I'm uncomfortable with people asking me these kinds of questions, then that might be a signal that you haven't finished your thinking and that there's some more clarity that's needed. So when a question is a gift, and if it's raising something in you that you're not quite clear on, it's an opportunity to get clearer. Okay. If I'm raising a question to a founder and asking some questions of them, I'm a subordinate to a founder asking a founder a question, then I still ask the questions and do your best to pick up the either scraps of information that you're getting to help the founder get clearer. Because if you're a person in an organization that helps somebody think out loud and you reflect it back to them and it becomes clearer and clearer and clearer, you're going to be extremely valuable, because those that can turn chaos into clarity are really valuable people. And then you're starting to get your reps in on how to create clarity, and you're starting to create a reputation that you are a person who creates clarity. If I'm a co-founder of a company and I'm not clear on the roles in the company and who owns what, then we've got chaos from the beginning. Do you own this or do I own this? So this system ultimately is a system of registering the agreements you make with yourself and others. And the act of writing makes the agreements clear. And then the act of putting them on the appropriate map helps you hold that conversation at the appropriate level of perspective. So if you are having problems down here on your to-do list or in a project, it's probably because a role hasn't been defined up here. Who owns this? One finger, one belly button. Who owns it, right? So, um, so it's that kind of stuff. The act of writing is an act of clarity. The act of placing that writing on the appropriate map is just another level of clarity. So you can hold a conversation with yourself or with another business partner or with the team. So you're all literally on the same page. Yeah.
I'm glad you explained it that way because again, there's a lot of I want to say like misinformation, toxic information that is throughout entrepreneurial communities, startup communities especially, um, where again people believe that if they write things down, if they document stuff, they're wasting time. But you very clearly have demonstrated that it's not only a good exercise to get that clarity, but it has long lasting benefits that span in every direction of your business. So it's worthwhile. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, William. Yeah. If there's anything you want to ask about, you've been hanging out. Feel free. I know you're working on a couple different projects. Feel free to share, and if you want just like some feedback or some suggestions on how to better approach that. Yeah, Mike's here to answer that too. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. While we wait and hang out, yeah, I want to go back to the purpose because I think again, like it's so important in regards to a person's
Which purpose?
yeah, well, all purpose. I mean, so many people feel lost and confused or just I don't know, numb in a lot of ways because they're doing things without that purpose. So I'm curious, like, again, do you have any anecdotes, any stories to share that can really speak to, again, the detriment of not being aware or establishing a purpose versus doing those exercises and making sure that your behaviors align with that purpose?
Yeah, I'll give you a simple answer and then I'll back into um, a more robust answer for that. So the simple answer is when you wake up in the morning today, the act of writing down the outcomes that you want to get to today. Let's say you're working on a customer project, so you're working on customer A. You've got to finish the website um, is live is another project that you're working on, and then we've got mom's birthday from our example. So if you start the day by writing down the outcomes that you're working on, you don't have to complete all these projects today because there are multiple actions, but the act of writing it down registers this in your nervous system and reminds you of what's important to you. And then for each of these things, like for customer A, you need to call Bob. For the website live, you need to email images to Gary. And then for mom's birthday, I need to call my sister. So at this level, what you've done is you've set yourself up for momentum because there's no thinking needed anymore. You've registered, here's my starting set of actions, break the huddle and say go. and you just check one of these things off. And the act of doing that is important. Let me tell you why it's important. Because if we take a photo album analogy, and Seth Godin said this a long time ago, and I loved it, which is if you take a photo album off the shelf and you look at those photos, those are memories that you're practicing. And those memories become the strongest memories that you remember because you've got a trigger and you practice it every time you pull out a photo album. Now, if you've got 40 projects over here, and every time, at least once a week, you pull out this book of projects and you review it and remind yourself what you're working on, that impacts your nervous system. And then daily, when you draw 3 of these down, this is where we do the digital to analog dance. You know, some people can handle all of this in just a digital format. There's no rule that says you have to write it down. Some people do it in digital format. However, the key word that you use that I'm triggering on is numb. Sometimes you get numb to all the information in our digital systems, and they no longer have a rich feeling to it. And then the other problem is when you enter your digital systems, and it could be your phone as well, you're instantly distracted from your intention of what you went there for. Like, have you ever gone to, like, I'm going to go here to do this, and all of a sudden, 2 hours later, you still haven't done that thing because you got distracted. Now, that's the value these days of creating a digital free environment where you can actually register your intentions. And when you register your intentions, you're practicing it, you're reminding yourself that this is important. And then you can go ahead and do those things. And the other thing to reinforce this is about every, at least every 4 hours or every one day, just reflect back and ask yourself, what's a small win that I had? Let's reward ourselves. What's something I'm grateful for? Cultivating the attitude of gratitude. And then what is something I learned? Creating a learning posture for yourself. And then you can use this information to help guide what you're going to do in the next 4 hours, or use it as inspiration to keep going tomorrow when this stuff happens. So, we're living in a world of AI, digital overwhelm. It's not going away. Slack, email, website, all this kind of stuff's coming at us. But in all of that, what do you want to do now? If I were to ask you, what are your 3 things? Can you name them? And what are your 5 actions? Can you name them? If yes, then you've positioned yourself as the hero of this story to go on a small journey today that will help you move something forward. And now we're back to creating these small wins that over time will have big impacts. So that's how that works.
Yeah. And I again like having spent a lot of time in different like mindfulness circles and therapy and such, like it is really good to see a take on project management that is rooted in human psychology in a positive way, that it's reinforcing these very helpful, rewarding human characteristics, personality traits that others ignore or disregard, which leads to that numbness. And I love for you to like zone in again on the reflex beat, or yeah, right, that's what
Yeah.
yeah. um I mean, like, again, thinking about like benefits, like you said, small wins, big impacts. um what kind of led to this? What was the methodology here? What was the thought process for building like a system around this, and how have you seen that benefit people?
There are 3 things that I can point to that are inspirations for this. And so I'm going to go in a bit of storytelling here real quick, and there will be 3 stories here. So the first story is, I used to live in Burlington, Vermont. Back there, I was a member of United Church of Christ, which was a UCC church, a Protestant church. and I was a deacon, and I was responsible for delivering communion. And I promise this story is going someplace. And as a deacon, you're responsible for communion. And in that tradition, basically, you go to the grocery store the night before, you get a loaf of bread, you freeze it, you wake up in the morning and you cut it into cubes that you can put on the communion tray. So I woke up the morning, grabbed my frozen bread, I cut it into cubes, and I see all these cubes falling out onto my breadboard. I'm like, oh my God, it just kind of hit me all at once that these pieces of bread are little pieces of sanctuary for people to put their hopes, their dreams, their suffering, their joy as they take communion. So I was like, that really that idea of creating small bits of sanctuary really stuck with me. Fast forward years later, I read this article in Harvard Business Review by this gentleman called Chris Lowney, and he wrote a book called Heroic Leadership, which was based on Jesuit practices. So the Jesuits back in the day, about every 4 hours, when before email and all this kind of stuff, their operating system was they would pause every 4 hours, they would look backwards 4 hours, they would pray for divine intervention, and then they would take that pause, that inspiration, and decide what they're going to do in the next 4 hours. So that very simple operating principle helped the Jesuits just spread across the planet, build universities, and all kinds of good stuff showed up based on current reality. They didn't try to force anything. They did it in small, scrum-like increments, right? And then the last one is in the Doing to Done book, I have a weekly review process to bring people in where it's called review. So you review your calendar and your project list, reflect, which is basically what am I grateful for? What did I learn? And then reset, which is basically what are my top 3 projects? What are my top 5 outcomes? So I saw people be very, very successful with that process. And the last step of that process is basically these cards. And then I took the middle section there, the reflect beat, and took the inspiration from creating smaller points of sanctuary and how do I help people get out of a digital environment where I saw them suffering or getting tripped up, seeing them have a beautiful constraint called this analog tool and be very successful with it. So that's what led to this 1-2 impact of the focus beat card, which is the today card, and the reflect beat card, which is the one that we're looking here at the screen. Um, so basically, what is my intention? Let me write it down so I can see it. I'm repracticing it. It doesn't take a long time. It's under 5 minutes for both of these cards, but when you do so, you practice creating clarity for yourself. So that's the inspiration.
Yeah, and again, like that clarity, it's rooted in such positive momentum, not this like negative drive that a lot of people typically, again, in like entrepreneurship, career development, are constantly being exposed to in regards to, making these comparisons between themselves and other people that are, more successful than them or further along, or, other people that, are working all the time and making these huge sacrifices and, just ruining their lives in a lot of ways, and their health, their mental health, their physical health, their relationships with people, because they're just being obsessive, right? And
Yeah.
here, what you're doing is, especially with the reflect beat and reset beats, and then also the focus on the purpose and intention of all this is building positive momentum where you're consistently celebrating your efforts, your work, your progress, and the progress. It's not big progress because it's only been 4 hours since, like, the last time you've done this in some cases. So how much crazy progress can take place in just 4 hours, right? So
Yeah.
any bit of progress is still progress, and it's worth celebrating. And so you're not only practicing good business habits or career habits, but just good mental health practices where a person's building up that confidence and feeling good about themselves and those around them that are, a part of this whole process of their ambition. And yeah, just, being able to grow. And that's another thing that I think is wonderful, this learning point or discovery aspect of this. And so I recently joined Founders Boost as a program manager for one of their accelerator programs. And during the week, like each week's like a block within the curriculum. And every week, we're asking the cohort companies, the founders, that question as well. What have you learned? What have you discovered? During the course of, like, the session that we had with different mentors or speaker com, and
Yeah.
it's rooted in the same kind of, like, mentality of really want everyone to be aware of these discoveries, these learning, points, so they can celebrate that and they can feel good that they're making momentum, even in situations when, you know, some of these ambitions, these visions that people have that they're working towards are very, very lofty, and they're not going to be achieved overnight. It's going to take a lot of time and effort to make any progress, like substantial progress towards these things. So if you're only focused on, this distant point that you're, only one step out of 40 miles of going, and you're only focused on how you have 40 miles left to go and you've only taken 3 steps, right? It's going to be really easy for most people to get down on themselves and start making those negative kind of, like, comparisons and all that. But instead, taking this approach, you're looking back on those 3 steps and you're like, holy shit, we made 3 steps. We're 3 steps closer to than where we were. This is awesome. Let's keep going, right? So
Yeah.
I just feel like it's such a wonderful system and methodology and approach that you've taken with this. Um, William has a
Yeah.
question. Uh,
Yeah, I love this question too. It's a very holistic human question. And when you're in this space, we're human, and these are the kinds of things. So,
let me real quick, for those that are listening, let me read the question that William has over here on Start
yeah.
Mata. William asks, what do you recommend when someone is managing an illness that can consume large, variable amounts of time each day? So, yeah, please.
So, William, is this you or is this a person that you're managing? I can do a hypothetical, like I've seen this scenario and play that out, or I can get specific and walk you through it. Um, well, why don't I go like the pattern that I've seen? Okay. And do we have the ability? I don't know if people
Yeah,
want to come on and ask the question, or
yeah, William, if William would like to, William's welcome to join us on stage. But yeah, totally up to you, William.
yeah. So let me know. Plan A is I can use like a generic, show you the pattern that I've seen. Plan B, we can work on yours specifically. And plan C is you can always contact me after this if you want to talk specifically, and I can drop in a way to set up a virtual coffee in the chat. Let me just do that right now, too. Okay. All right. So you want to give William the mic?
You have an invitation, William.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome and thank you for this question. You're not alone, I can tell you that. So, number one, so when working with, let's just call the thing on your mind, managing an illness. And so, and then managing time and variable amounts of windows and energy that go with that. So, as much as you're willing to share, what's the context of the situation that you're handling?
Uh, well, I have like a illness that I've been dealing with for the past couple of years, and it just takes a lot of time. And then at the same time, I'm like working on various projects. Um, and so it's like significantly impacted my like productivity. It significantly impacts like my ability to manage relationships, to make commitments, to do like in-person meetings. Um, and so it's kind of weird though because I can like suppress it for periods of time, but then uh, recently I did that for like a week while working on like a project, and then for like days, then like had to recover. Um,
Okay.
so it impacts like everything that I do, but it is
Is
somewhat like
this is
yeah.
this something that is chronic or is something that you're seeking to resolve?
Both. So it's like being
Okay.
resolved, but it's just taking like a very long time. So
Okay. So one thing that that does is that has gives me back to the role clarity map where we have a role of me, and then sometimes when we have a health situation come up, we can name it as its own separate thing to manage. So, you know, um, and you could create a name for that. So, um, well, me or um, X, um, managed or some kind of name to hold the role that's holding this thing that you're working on. And then what I would do is identify, what is the purpose of this role to move through this situation, to manage the situation so that I can live the best life I can live, or something for the moment, because this might be a temporary role that you need to hold. And then within that, establish what your vision of wild success for you successfully managing this condition, what that might be. And then when we do that, we place you in this role as the hero of this role. And this is your backstory. This is the context that you're working in. You've got work projects coming at you, all kinds of stuff that need to be managed. Now, within this role of being well, there might be some very specific practices that you can do that help you manage this situation best for you. It could be your diet, could be your rest, could be your sleep, whatever it is. How do we create the conditions for you to be the best well you as possible is the question. And then out of those, going back to the Pareto principle, what are the 20% of the activities that give me the best outcomes, and make sure I know those, and then I'm writing them down and intentionally practicing those. And then sometimes you might have some projects that come into play that you need to deal to help manage this situation. A project could be a surgery or a new med or something like that, where that gets introduced. So at the highest level, roles are very dynamic in our lives. So as we move through life, different stuff is going to present itself over time. And this role clarity map is meant to be dynamic to help you handle your anchor role, yourself, and then more permanent roles like son, daughter, me, husband, wife, that kind of stuff. And then we have these interim roles, temporary roles sometimes that we have to manage. So that's part one. But the other thing I've seen here with roles like this is an energy window that needs to be managed. So let's go down to probably the best way for me to explain this is going down to your next 4 hours. So if I'm working on my reset beat, I would say, you know, you could even do a reset reflect beat just on managing your health condition. Like, what was the win in your health condition? What are you grateful for? What did you learn? But then in the next 4 hours, right here, how can you best exist? And sometimes you might be able to do something. So you write down a plan of doing, but I also want to invite you to think about sometimes the most strategic thing to do is do nothing. So you might create space for nothing over here because you realize that I need to recover energy in this space. So space to do nothing is strategic. And you might want to define your space to do nothing windows, and you might want to define your higher energy windows and get really clear on where they are on your calendar and plan around those as well. And hopefully between those two ideas, maybe that contributes to your cause. And I hope, does that help? Do you have questions?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the space to do nothing is something that like I've wanted to try to do more, you know, to be able to like time box the illness and, you know, I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I feel like I could potentially do that. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's my initial thought.
Yeah. And you might even find your recipe for this. Is this space to do nothing 15 minutes? Is it 60 minutes? Is it half a day? So whatever it is for you, there might be a play in your playbook that you just name and you do an experiment and you see how it works. And then the power of recalibrating every 4 hours could be your friend in this situation. So,
Okay.
Yeah, kind of like going back to like, you know, the earlier themes, it's like taking the time to document these things. And this again goes back to like, you know, basic human psychology, the benefits of journaling, right? You've taken like another wonderful element of healthy mental practice in journaling, and you've applied more intention behind it with these, you know, reflect reset beats. And you know, going through the course of documenting these beats over time, these will allow you to more effectively learn from your past experiences and come up with better assumptions and eventually better strategies and plans to achieve these different like goals you have, or at least have a better awareness of how to manage and work within these different limitations that you may have. And this is something like, you know, like William, we've talked about a little bit before in regards to my own like health issues, and applying these types of like, you know, practices, and you know, having these wonderful cards from Mike that he's given me, and introducing that to, you know, my own journaling in this way, it's been very very helpful in, yeah, learning how to manage things, how to create more clear boundaries in space. And so yeah, hopefully it's got you at least like, you know, brainstorming some different approaches.
yeah. Let me, Gary, let me show, I'm going to hide my screen for a second and show a different screen here. Share window. Where'd it go? And I just want to show this concept in reality, what it looks like in reality. All right. Suspense is killing me, right? Let's see here. Share window. Share this window. Okay. Can you see my pictures here?
It's a dark screen at the moment.
It's a dark screen at the moment.
Yeah, it's all dark. It's like a dead monitor.
All right. I'm going to share a window. And I'm share. How about now?
Still dark.
Okay.
William, are you seeing dark too, or is that just me?
It just looks black.
Okay, yeah.
All right, I'm going
Unfortunately.
to share my whole screen now. All right. Come on, people. Where'd you go? I'll share entire screen. Okay.
Okay.
See my screen then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is an example of a month's worth of reflect beats. And the idea is this is March for me. And then as you move through March, the ability to, this is where the learning comes in over here, where you can start to see, you know, what were the big wins. You know, I fixed a clog in my 3D printer, I got an order, I got a reseller certificate, so on and so forth. So the knowledge of your small wins and the patterns that emerge from this is extremely valuable. Like one of these small wins for me, like the reseller certificate, discovering that and getting that into play saved me thousands of dollars over the course of the year. So as business owners, there's wins like that, but there's also health wins that you can declare for yourself and learn what's really working for you. So I offer that up as kind of a down the road view of how these things fit together, and then you can place it in a card box, and you place the card box back on your bookshelf, and you know March is in the books. So that is what that kind of looks like in practice.
I like that for two reasons. Again, as you just mentioned, you have knowledge that you can reflect on and learn from. But then also, going back to your story about looking through the photo album, right? And
Yep.
sitting with these memories and making them fresh. Having like, you know, those journals and documents in that form where you're just like listing all your lessons, what you learned, how you what your wins are, all these little celebrations, like that too is wonderful help when you're dealing with, like, you know, again, a big ambitious project or your health, because so much of the day to day is difficult to recognize what progress you're making. But if you're able to just, like, you know, look at all these cards laid out over the last month, last 2 months of what you've been doing in practice and how you've been making that progress, even if you can't really feel it, at least you can see it. And it makes it so much more tangible and, like, it's hard for me to explain, but
Yeah,
it just builds that momentum in the right way where you for me, I feel less insane because it's so easy to just feel like very disconnected from reality when I'm dealing with like health stuff, when it's been like, you know, a year, a couple years, and it's like, okay, I know I'm doing stuff, I know that I'm making progress, but I can't really feel it in that way that I want to yet. But then being able to look back on all these things, like, okay, no, actually, I'm way better than I was. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm so much better. And then it's like, oh, okay, get a little bit more like momentum, a little bit more space, and a little bit less like frustration, anger, those negative emotions as a result of this too.
Right. Yeah, because every time you the what you're pointing to there is when you keep in agreement with yourself, you get a win. And when you get that kind of win, your self-confidence grows just a little bit over time. And it keeps growing from there. So these cards are the reminders that I did it, I can do it, here's exactly what I did. So that's very helpful. Are you still there, Gary?
Yeah, I'm still here. William,
Okay.
yeah, you have any thoughts, any comments, any ideas, inspirations?
Mm, this is useful.
Yeah, William, if you do ever want to connect one-on-one, feel free to use the link I put there for virtual coffee, and we can chat about it in more detail if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
William, do you want to
And
share any of the projects that you're working on? If you want to hear like any
Um,
like thoughts from Mike about him.
uh, well, it's a little bit chaotic right now. I have like digital projects, but then I'm sort of negotiating to try to take over like a coffee shop and bar that I like, but it's, there's people vying for it. It's kind of like a failing business that would succeed. It's only failing because it was unmanaged. Um, and
yeah,
so now it's so I've made an offer and everything, and I'm waiting to hear back. So that's been kind of chaotic because I spent like a week going there every day to observe operations and figure out what was going on. And then stopped like abruptly. So it's like I started, it's like I went from 0 to 100 and then went from 100 back to 0 and uh, so it's kind of a weird situation right now. So, after
so
this,
which
uh,
so William, on the coffee bar piece,
mhm.
let's use this as an example. Let's make that something different. What's your intention with the coffee bar? What's your desired? What's the outcome that you're trying to get to?
Well, I would like to own and operate it. So that's the goal. And
And is that is that is that a role you want to be in? Is it you want to be a coffee bar owner and you're looking into this one,
uh,
or
sort yes, I've wanted. So it's like a coffee shop and a bar. So it's like a coffee
okay,
shop during the day, a bar at night. I've never wanted to like own a bar, but I wanted to do a coffee shop. I've done a co-working space in the past. This this just sort of came up, it was one of those things. It just sort of came up.
okay,
I've been thinking about it for a long time. And so, yeah, it's like I would like to be a coffee shop owner. That's in terms of a role. Like, yeah, that's like a fantasy of mine. Um,
okay? So let's name that as coffee shop owner. So you can always start this stuff with like naming the role, and then you know then there's a purpose for that for you, and then there's a vision of wild success for you. So I would recommend that you get very specific, and for vision, I offer I invite people to draw the vision of wild success. And then that'll lead you to what do successful coffee shop owners do, practice day in and day out, and what kind of projects do they manage? Now, in this one, it sounds like here down at the at this level, there's a special kind of project that we have, which is one called Look Into. Look into owning, coffee shop XYZ, right? That's the project you're currently doing, right?
yeah.
So you're looking into it. And what's special about a look into project is it helps you gather information to generate options. So option A, I could buy it. Option B, maybe it's as simple as yes or no for this opportunity, right? And it helps you create these options so you can make an informed decision on whether this is a good business decision for you. Now, based on your current reality today and your relationship with this thing called owning a coffee shop, if this were the only thing for you to work on right now, what would be your very next action?
Um, what would be my next? My next action is to follow up on the offer that I made, I guess. But is that
And how
what you
would you do that?
I have to send a text and say to this person, if you have questions or comments, let me know. I would think about telling them that I still that expressing my interest in doing it to help them feel like good about it. Um,
Okay,
that was my
perfect. So, so in this scenario, just in just like a couple minutes, a couple things happened here. One, we named a a larger emerging role for you as I want to be a coffee shop owner, potentially
Mhm.
one way to handle it. And then in that we found a project, or the project found you. It could have landed here first,
Mhm.
and then it unveiled this role. Like, oh, I should handle this as a role. So then I can come back down and look at this project as one on a journey to getting to this role activated, right?
Okay.
And because this may or may not be an option. If it's a no, do you give up on this vision for yourself to be a coffee shop owner?
Mm, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. It's like there's
Yeah.
like
So it's these kinds of questions. Like, is it opportunistic? Yes. Great. Then it kind of starts down here, and then may lead you to this. Or now that this came into your life, it may have revealed that this is the larger intent that you want to get at. And then all of the options available to you in the universe, is this the best one to realize this? I don't know the answers to any of that, but those are the kinds of questions that it can now bring up for you strategically.
okay. Sounds good.
And then, every project down here, you now you're really clear on what you need to do. You need to text the person back, let them know that you're still interested, and you're creating the conditions for this piece to get resolved, which is, is this even an option?
Right.
So that's back, Gary, going back to like the beginning of the beginning. What's the value in writing this stuff down and seeing it play out? It's these kinds of conversations that I get to have with people to create clarity both at the project level, the doing level, and higher level perspective levels, because it's up here where all the kind of inspiration sits for what you're going to do down here. And the value in seeing your wholeness across all the different roles in your life, managing a coffee shop, in this short conversation, managing, becoming a coffee shop owner, how does that jive with my current health and wellness and what I need to manage there, in addition to all the other stuff I'm holding in life?
Right.
So, but these are dialogues that you get to have with yourself once you get to see the territory.
Yeah. I find the rule thing helpful because it's something I feel like you can observe it. And I felt like I observed it, it's like I hadn't been in a situation where I'd been acting as it, as like, in that kind of role in like a while. So I didn't know like how I would operate in it. And like, it felt very comfortable. And I realized I was like relatively good at it. Just naturally, I was able to like do things and manage things and deal with situations. It's like a bar, so there was like all sorts of weird situations. I had to call the cops on somebody. There was an ambulance had to come at a separate incident, and like there was just all sorts of drama. And yet, like I was very like comfortable with it, and it was because like the role like fit for some reason, and it wasn't like a conscious thing. It was just like it just sort of fit, but then it is like foreign to me. It's not what I normally do. So, and now I've taken a pause while we work out the offer. So it's like, I don't know, but it's that role aspect is very like a conscious thing to me.
That's great.
So,
Yeah, because the roles, what we say yes to, when we say yes to something, we say no to something else. And when we say no to something, we say yes to something else. So, pulling our systems thinker hat on, as we fill out all the roles in your life, this is the system you're creating for yourself. And within a coffee owner system, there's other games you play called practices and managing customer relationships, calling the cops, whatever you need to do, because this condition produces those kinds of things. And so that's where this gets a lot of fun.
Hmm.
The owner system, there's other games. Well, I wish you well on your health and the coffee shop. I love coffee. So
Thanks.
I'm taking another swig right now.
Yeah, I am dropping off because I had to skip my morning coffee, and I'm looking forward to grabbing a cup when we get done. But yeah, we're actually like, yeah, we're over time. You're awesome, Mike, for helping out. Um,
Yeah, my pleasure.
yeah, this has been really insightful, wonderful discussion. And William, I really appreciate you coming up and helping out, and sharing what you're working on, and what your kind of like challenges are. And yeah, I think there's a couple key takeaways that we already kind of touched on, but absolutely, as Mike kind of demonstrated, taking space, taking time to rest, recover. It's strategic. It's gonna make you more productive and a happier, healthier person. And yeah, that rebound effect. It's something that I'm very accustomed to. I'll go real hard, start feeling better, and then be productive. But then, yeah, I need to recover. I need to be okay with that, and that's been a point of frustration for me. But you know, having time with like, mentors like Mike and others, and, my own like, therapist, and putting in that awareness that is, it's just the limitations that, you're dealing with. It's out of your control. So there's no reason to get upset about it. Just find ways to work with it and keep moving forward. So hopefully, yeah, these discussions and what Mike has been able to share has been hopefully comforting to you and giving you a little bit more uh, of a plan to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Clarity is kind. We need to be kind to ourselves, and small wins have big impacts.
It's beautiful. I love it. I'm all about it. I support that. Yeah, so let's head out. Mike, if you have any, I mean, if that was a wonderful final note, but if you have anything else you'd like to share with the community, please go for it. Now's the time.
Um, Let me see here. Yeah, just thanks for inviting me in. And if anybody has any questions, I've dropped a virtual coffee link there in the chat. I dropped a link to the Clarity Collection, which has the maps and has the cards, and you can find out more about the book Doing to Done at that link as well. Um, and I look forward to seeing you around the 805, and wish you continued success in all you do, and look forward to being back here someday in the future.
Fantastic. I deeply appreciate you playing a role in getting this community going like this. Yeah, it means the world to me. So thank you. And yeah, all the resources and insights have been, yeah, very helpful. I've got cards all over my desk right now, which is awesome.
Nice.
But yeah, all right. Yeah, William, thank you again. Those on YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, thanks for joining us. And yeah, please follow up. All the links to Mike are on the event page on Startmata, and I post them in the chat as well. With that, yeah, catch you guys all later, guys and gals and NBs.